When you think of INSEAD or a Harvard or a Stanford or any of the top B schools, you think, oh, wow, I can't do this. Like, I think only good people get it, and I'm not good enough. I think we should stop saying that to ourselves. What I loved about it, I had to care about interviews or recruitment only once during my entire INSEAD journey, which is towards the last 3 months. But for people who are joining the Jan batch, they had to think about internships in the second month, then do the internship, then come back, and then it was interviews again if you sort of didn't convert your internship.
Welcome to another episode of Crack the MBA show. Our guest today is Aishik Dhar. Aishik graduated from BITS Pilani with a degree in math and computer science. Thereafter, he worked as a software developer at Amazon in their payments division and then as a product manager at Goodera, enabling volunteering opportunities for people worldwide. Aishik helped establish Goodera's operations in US. Aishik was a recipient of the Orange Scholarship at INSEAD and graduated with an MBA degree from there in 2022. Aishik is currently working as an associate at McKinsey and Company in London. During his spare time, Aishik is an avid theater, photography, chess, and football enthusiast. In fact, Aishik has been to nearly 10 Arsenal games at their stadium in the last 1 year. Welcome, Aishik. Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Hi, Nupur. Thank you so much for having me. Super excited about how the show goes.
Same here, same here. I stole your fun fact already in the introduction, so I'm going to pester you and see if you can come up with one more fun fact. Do you have another one for our audience?
Okay, now that's putting me in a spot. Let me just say the fun fact that we shared already once, which is that I've been to around 30 music concerts in the last 1 year in London, which included that of Coldplay, The Weeknd. I'm going for one in March, which is for John Mayer. I went for Ed Sheeran, George Ezra, you name it, and I think I must have gone for it. That's one fun fact for sure.
Yeah, this is a pretty cool one. You're doing more than a concert a month. That's pretty amazing. All right, Aishik, before we get into the admissions questions, would love to understand a little bit more about you personally. Would love to know what has driven you to be on a path where you've seen so much success at a very early age.
Yeah. I think, quite frankly, if I had to point out one person who was super influential in me achieving what I have and inculcating in me and all the right habits, I would say that's been my mom. So starting from making me understand the importance of education at a very early age to small habits like being on time, having a schedule set up for myself, being disciplined in what I do, etc., to even co-curriculars where she put me all of the good things that you pointed out about me in terms of my hobbies like photography, chess, football and stuff like that. But also I was introduced to those by my mom. So I would definitely say my mom has been the major reason for all of my success.
Very cool. And you talked about the hobbies, right? And how those have been a part of your success as well. How do you think they've contributed? Like, how do you think it helps to be involved in extracurricular activities?
Yeah, let me just take maybe a couple of examples. Firstly, if I look at chess, I think it shows you the importance of patience. I mean, when I used to play these games at an early age of like 12, 13, some of those games used to go on for like 4 hours or 5 hours or 6 hours. And you're thinking about one particular move for 20, 30 minutes, right? So, and it's totally relatable to that of life where you need to take the time to ponder and think about what your next step should be. And at each step, you should have the patience to keep going. In fact, I do have an example of patience and persistence in a way as well, which maybe I'll come to later when the question arises. But so that's chess. In football, there's highs and lows within those 90 minutes. So that tells you the importance of failures, what you learn from it, and how you can sort of go on and turn that into success. So yeah, those are just two examples of how I think these co-curricular activities can sort of help you achieve success in life.
Fair, fair. And actually, to your point about you have an example of patience as well, might as well bring it up here where the audience will be able to relate to it better.
I think it's a combination of chess and football. So the first time I gave GMAT was back in 2016 after I graduated from my undergrad. I didn't think much about it, just went and gave the exam and I got a 700, right? And that was valid for 5 years is what I think. Then when I started applying for my schools and when I was talking to you, I realized that maybe 700 is I mean, not saying it's bad, but given the application pool, Indian application pool particularly, I think 700, we could work upon it and make it better. So then I give my next GMAT exam, right? I prepared for this for like 2.5 months. And then I gave my second GMAT exam, and that was 710. Now, the point is, of course, it was a failure of sorts because I was aiming for more. But at that point, I immediately clicked on cancelled and I canceled the score because I believed in myself I could do better. So the 710 was like right there when I got the score, I sort of canceled it, right? And then 15 days later, because 15 days is the minimum gap that you need to give into exams, I gave the exam again and I got a 740. So I think it just shows that failure is a part of success and patience is important, and you have to sort of keep going and going and going.
No, that's a helpful example. Cool. With that, we'll move more to the admission side of things, Aishik.
Sure.
As an alum of Crack the MBA, can you share your experience working with CTM?
Yeah, I would actually want to break it up into two pieces. The first piece, so when I had to choose between an MBA consultant, and the second piece is sort of how I chose and work with you, right? So initially, I was thinking, is an MBA consultant important in the application process? I was talking to a senior of mine who had gone through the exact same process, and he said, you should not be asking me if you need an MBA consultant. You should ask me, which MBA consultant should I go for? So that's the importance of an MBA consultant. And he said, just talk to Nupur and see how she is, because I loved working with her. And I trusted him blindly, right? So, and then when I talked to you, you were the only MBA consultant who made me feel the least good about my candidacy. You didn't say, oh, you know what, you'll get through all the colleges, you're great, etc., because I always like when people point out the things that I can do better, instead of saying, oh, you're the best and you will get through, right? So there was no false hopes, not the right word, but butchering, all of that involved in that thing. And I knew at that point that I would love to work with you. And during our entire process, I think what you brought about, there were two really important things. I think the first would be schedule, discipline, time, and adhering to it, right? I really do not think I would have been able to pull off. I think I ended up applying to some 7 colleges across 2 rounds. I really don't think I would have been able to do that without your help, for sure. And that's, in fact, something that has stuck me throughout life as well. I think those few months that we worked together, the discipline that you inculcated in me was super helpful. And secondly, I think helping me delve into my past, understanding myself better, and finally portraying them or producing them as essays on the SSX. Again, I think the entire process, I think we initially had like a document of 70 pages where I sort of, every night I used to think, hey, what is my past? What are my motivations and stuff like that? So I think both of these things would not have been possible without you, for sure. Yeah, so that's the answer.
Thanks for sharing, Aishik. So Aishik, when did you decide to pursue your MBA and why? Was there like a moment of epiphany?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. I think I wouldn't say for me there was a moment of epiphany, but I think it was a slow and gradual process. But by 2018, I knew I wanted to do that. That was just when I was sort of getting out of Amazon, which was my first job, getting into the business side of things. And I just moved to the US as a part of my startup, Goodera, trying to set up operations in the US. I realized that I loved the business side more and I would love to know more about it. And one of the best ways to do that is to do an MBA. That's one. So the first reason is, as I said, was to sort of move into the business side and know more about it. The second was that when I was in the US, I just met so many amazing people from across different cultures that I thought I would love to go to a place which is like a melting pot of cultures, people from different parts of the world. And what better place than an MBA school for that, right? So that was the second one. And third one, sort of, I wanted to move out of the country as well for a bit, see the job sector in different parts of the world.
Okay. And what attracted you to INSEAD?
The tagline of INSEAD is business school for the world. And I think it just stays true to it much more than any other business school in the world. Having talked to my friends across most leading business schools, it's just so diverse. So there's no nationality, which is more than like 3-4% on average. India being the highest, I think India and China and India and France, two of these are basically the highest at like 7%. But apart from that, in any friends group that you have, if there's a group of 10 people, you would for sure have like 5, 6, 7 nationalities in it. So the amount of knowledge, the amount of awareness that you get after spending one intense year with all of these people is amazing. So that's the biggest reason. The other reasons are that, one, it's closer to home. my home is India, so it's closer to home. So I can sort of fly back at times. In fact, I'm in India right now for my winter break. Second would be the fact that it's a 1 year MBA. So it gives me the opportunity, much better than the US schools, to sort of get back into the job market, start earning earlier and stuff like that. And finally, compared to the US schools, it has a much better sort of job opportunities are much better for all other parts of the world apart from the US. So if you want to stay in the US, go to a US school. If you want to go to any other part of the world, go to INSEAD.
Okay, that's a really nice way to look at it. And I guess that also explains why you chose INSEAD over other American admits that you had, right? Like including Kellogg, Tuck, etc.
Exactly. That's you're 100% right. The 1 year MBA, the job opportunities in other parts of the world, being closer to home, all of those are true when I was looking at INSEAD versus US business schools.
Right, right. Makes sense. And Ashik, INSEAD has a ton of essays, like a gazillion essays, right? So how did you approach your essays and help us understand those two or three stories that helped you shine in the application process?
You're right that INSEAD has by far like the most number of essays compared to any other application that I've done. But in hindsight, it's also a great thing because the amount of work that I had to do, think about my past, understand my motivations, etc., was a lot more for INSEAD compared to sort of other schools. I would say some of the stories that helped me stand out. Number one, it might not be the most intense story, but the most important one are sort of my international exposure stories, the way I sort of work with my international teams, how I sort of moved to the US with my startup and started their North America operations there, etc. So I think that was super critical. The second, I would say, would be sort of my motivations about how I moved to Goodera. So how I sort of related or connected that with my past. So when I was a child, I used to sort of visit a lot of these small villages across the eastern side of India, along with my father, who was the head of sustainability at ONGC. And I saw how young children could not achieve the potential because of the lack of education. So I was super motivated in giving back. When I was a child, I thought education was the source or the way of doing it. Slowly and surely, when I grew up, I thought it could be broadened and ways of giving could be sort of more broad. Yeah, and giving back basically became one of the most important reasons why I joined Godera, which enabled volunteering and donations for people across the world. So that entire story of giving back and my motivations of my job, etc. And that I also sort of actually connected that to my short-term and long-term goals as well post INSEAD. So I think that was the second most important story. Yeah, I would put these two stories as actually the two most important stories. Yeah.
Okay, fair, fair. And you talked a little bit about setting up North America operations for
Yeah.
Goodera, right? And
Yeah.
INSEAD has a really strong focus on international motivation.
Yeah.
Was
Yeah.
there any other way communicated your international motivation to INSEAD?
I think there were three ways in which I did that. Number one would be my time at Amazon, where my sister teams were sort of based out of multiple cities, including, I think it was London, Vancouver, Seattle, and Bangalore. So I used to talk to like international teams on a daily basis, right? So that sort of gave me an understanding of how international teams, people from across the world work. So that exposure was super important. So that's one. The second was the North America story that I just said. When I moved to the US, I was all alone. I set up a team of three, sort of recruited people, set up a team of three, set it up in Seattle based out of a WeWork. So that second story was super important. And the third one was at a personal front, where I sort of traveled quite a bit personally as well in different parts of the world, and how that also helped me grow as a person. So that was the third bit that was important.
Understood. And how do you convey the third bit, right? Which is like more about your personal travels, etc. Is that mostly through the essays or is it through interviews? What's the best way to do that?
No, I think I would do it through the essays because you never know whether the chance will arise during the interview. But I would definitely do it through the essays. I think there was one question in the essay set which said, what are your interests, hobbies, and stuff like that? Where I mentioned that I love photography and I connected that with me traveling abroad, clicking pictures, meeting people, etc., creating videos of that. So I think that was the connect that I had done. So it was not like super direct, but super subtle way of saying, hey, I've traveled quite a bit. Yeah.
Okay, very helpful. And Ashik, what advice do you have for candidates who do not have experience working abroad or even some of those personal experiences which you're talking about, or even with teams that are located abroad? Should they just not apply to INSEAD? Or what
That's an excellent question. In fact, there have been a few people who have sort of asked me this, so I know the answer that I give them. First of all, before this, I want to mention, why do they need international experience? I think that's important to understand. So INSEAD is, as I said, the most diverse school in this world. And as I mentioned, it's a 1 year course, or 10 months, in fact. So it's super intense as well. So the moment people land in Fontainebleau or Singapore, they want people to mix with each other super quickly. And hence, having international experience, having worked with people from across the world just helps in that process of mingling. So that's the motivation behind having international experience. Now, I always suggest that if you have traveled as a part of your team, as a part of your company, that's great. So that's one, do that. If you can't mention that, then the second bit is, say I've traveled with either clients or like teammates, even virtually, right? So even the second, that helps. And third is, of course, traveling, personal travels, and how that has helped you to grow. Now, if you don't have any of these three, I would just like to tell you that you should definitely still apply, because I had two people in my course from India who did not have international. No, I think one was Pakistan and one was India, who did not have international experience, but both of them still got through. So I'm just saying you should always try. And we talked about the importance of persistence. So never give up till you actually get a no. So keep trying, and I'm sure it'll happen.
Okay. That's really helpful and encouraging. And I'm sure people who don't have that experience will be
Yeah,
encouraged by those examples as well.
true. I mean, I
Do you
hope
know
so.
what like helped those candidates get in even without the international
I,
experience?
I I don't. So one of them was an engineer, and then was a product manager, always based out of Bangalore. I don't know how that happened. For both of them, I'm not sure, but I'm glad they're there. I don't know. Neither do
Fair.
they know. Yeah.
Fair. All right. Aishik, can we talk about the INSEAD interview now? What advice do you have for candidates with the INSEAD interview? Maybe you can share a little bit about your own experience.
Yeah.
And like, there are two interviewers. So is it that one is a good cop, one is a bad cop? We keep hearing that.
Yeah. I think two things that I would like to say. Number one, the interviews for INSEAD are quite different compared to the ones that happens for the US. How's that? The INSEAD interviewers actually seek to find whether you're fit for the school or not. So if you sort of cross that bar of being fit for the school, you would get through. So there's much less rejection at the interview level for INSEAD compared to other schools, right? It's not that you have to prove something to them. They just need to know that you are one of them, right? And that's the beauty of being an INSEAD as well, that every random INSEAD that you talk to in different parts of the world, there's an instant connect with them, right? So that's the connect that they're trying to find. So that's one. And hence, basically connected to this is the fact you should just stay true to who you are and not prove that, oh, I'm extraordinary, I'm great, please take me in, and stuff like that. Just be conversational, be who you are. And if they like you, right? By then. The second thing is, I don't think necessarily that, in fact, I think most of the interviewers are all good cops. There's no bad cop. But somehow for my interview, one of the interviewers was a bad cop. And she always, like from the get-go, she said, hey, why do you need to do an MBA? It's a waste of money. There's no point. Now, I don't know whether that was her experience or whether she was just trying to test me. But I stayed true to my beliefs. I didn't say, yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe I shouldn't do an MBA. I just maintained all the beliefs that I had in myself. And maybe that's what they're trying to test, whether what you have written in your essays are things that you actually stand by. So that's the other piece of advice that I would sort of like to give.
Yeah. Are you an interviewer as well? An alumni?
No, it happens, I think, after a few years. So it doesn't happen that quickly.
Oh.
But I think after 5 years, you start getting emails, but that's sometime back. So hopefully people who are watching this video 2-3 years down the line might have me, and you don't know whether I'll be bad cop or a good cop.
Yeah, but they know how to approach
But then you know how to approach it.
Fair. All right. And Ashik, what do you think INSEAD's admissions committee is looking for in its evaluation process?
Yeah, that's again a great question. I think each and every person at INSEAD is a high achiever. So for sure, that's one of the qualities that the admission committee is looking for. The second, I would say, being able to manage a lot of things at the same time, being persistent, etc. Because the intensity that you sort of see in the first few months is so high, given that it's a short sort of course. I think, will you be able to handle that pressure, right? So I think that's the other thing that the interviewers are looking for. And finally, I think the international experience as well, to a certain extent, because that helps you mingle, as I said. But yeah, I think those are overall the things that they're looking for.
Okay, fair. And Ashik, what aspects of your application and candidacy led to you securing the scholarship?
Quite frankly, I think, as I mentioned, like I have a feeling that in order to get a scholarship, even within the application pool, you need to be a bit better than others. That's my personal sort of understanding, but there's, of course, it's not written in stone, but that's my feeling. That's one. Secondly, some of the scholarships, not necessarily mine, but some of the scholarships do need you to be in a position of need for the scholarship. So they actually do see that. So all the things that you write, they sort of do read that in depth, etc. And your motivations as well. So the amount of time, in fact, you could take a leap out of this, that the amount of time that I spent on writing essays for the scholarships, which is another, by the way, deadline again, like it's an intense process. I spend a lot of time. A lot of people do not put in the right amount of effort. I thought I put in quite a bit of effort, give it the right amount of importance that it deserves. And the scholarship that I got was actually the maximum that Indians can get. So I believed I did the right things. But yeah, it's staying true to sort of your motivations for the scholarship itself and writing that in the right manner to reflect your motivations.
Right. You mentioned that it's probably about being better than the pool, right? And you were part of the Indian male engineer pool already, so super competitive. So do you think it was things like maybe your GPA, the fact that you had helped set up an office abroad?
I definitely think so. I mean, apart from the essay itself, which I think mine was really good, and of course with your help, but I think after going to INSEAD, I mean, a lot of people are seeing here, so I don't know, like my GMAT score was on the higher side, right? 710 is the average GMAT score, or 715 or something is the average GMAT score at INSEAD. Even with the Indian pool, I think it's the GMAT score is lower, right? So that was higher. The fact that I consistently maintained a good GPA throughout my undergrad also helped, right? Yeah, being on the higher side helps, but again, you just don't know, it's a black box. But that's my sort of feeling. Yeah.
Okay, fair. Aishik, the average age of an INSEAD student is 29 years at the time of enrollment, which means candidates have about 5 to 7 years of experience. How receptive is INSEAD to candidates with 2 or 3 years of work?
Yeah. So firstly, I think the average age for INSEAD is higher than that of the US MBA schools. Am I right in saying that?
Correct.
Yeah. That's also because of the fact that they think it's 1 year intense, so people should be a bit more mature. When they come in, they should just go and stuff like that. But they are receptive because the lowest age that we had at INSEAD was, I think, 25. That was, I think, with around 2-3 years experience. So you need to show the right motivations again. You need to stand out because the number of people they take at that age group is much lesser than the number of people they take at the 29-30 age group. So you need to stand out for sure. Your motivations need to be right because it's super difficult to explain why do you need to do an MBA after 2 years or 3 years of work. Because then you have the MIMs as well, which is the Master in Management, which is exactly for that age bracket, right? So your motivations need to be right. You need to stand out, but it's possible. But if you have the right reasons, it's definitely possible. Does that answer the question?
Yes, it does. And so you also recall that you had classmates who had
definitely
experience.
Definitely. The youngest of them was at 25. There were quite a few people. I would say like maybe 5%, 10% of them at like 25, 26, or even a bit 15%.
Okay. And moving more to the INSEAD experience itself, right? How would you compare the August intake versus the Jan intake? What are the pros and cons of each?
Yeah. So I think the important reason why people join the Jan intake is because there's a 2-month internship in the middle. It helps people get into fields like VC or like IB, which is otherwise not possible if you're coming from a completely separate background, right? That 2-month internship helps you convert that particular internship into a job, or at least gives you can mention that internship in your CV for the final placements for let's say IB or VC. So that's one of the most important reasons why people do that Jan intake. Apart from that, I would say everything else is more or less the same. But I personally prefer the August intake because I didn't want to go into VC or IB. So I didn't necessarily need that internship as such. And if you want to get into consulting, or if you want to get into product management, tech, for example, and consulting will never say, oh, do you have consulting experience from before? It's a super structured process. You give the interviews and you're done with it. What I loved about it, I had to care about interviews or recruitment only once during my entire INSEAD journey, which is towards the last 3 months. But for people who are joining the Jan batch, they had to think about internships in the second month, then do the internship, then come back, and then it was interviews again if you sort of didn't convert your internship. Right? It was a bit less fun, let's say, for the Jan batch compared to the August batch.
Yeah, that's a great point. Never thought of it that way. And are 10 months or is 1 year sufficient to do an MBA, or do you recommend going for a 2 year MBA now that you've done it?
That's a great point. And I would say, and I'm not saying this only from a personal experience, I'm saying this from after talking to people who have done their US MBA as well. And specifically at our age, when we have done a 4-5 year undergrad, we've been in the industry for some time. MBA is ultimately a lot of fun as well, right? So you want to have that, you want to learn, but at the same time, you want to sort of go back into the job market as well. Like it was so intense. It was just so much fun that by the end of 10 to 12 months, all of us at INSEAD, we said, you know what? I'm done. Like, I just want to go back now. Like, it was a lot of fun, but I'm done. At the same time, when I've talked to my US school friends, and when I had completed and I joined them along with them and I was done, I was back, they said, oh, wow, you're back. It must feel amazing, right? Because it becomes a bit of a drag, I would say, in the 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th month. So I would say it was the perfect intensity. And I don't necessarily think that, I mean, at INSEAD as well, if you wanted to go deep into a particular subject, you could have done that within those 10 months. You had all of the resources and the time to do that within those 10 months. If you didn't do that within those 10 months, you wouldn't do it even in like 24 months. So that's my sort of outlook. 10 months, 12 months is more than enough.
Yeah. I have a follow-up question on that. With consulting recruiting, right? A lot of candidates rely on the seniors. So maybe in the second year for the casing and for the prep. How does it all work at INSEAD? Because you don't have second year, so to speak.
I think there are two ways in which it happens. The first is, of course, casing with your friends, right? Casing with your friends, most of them will not have a consulting background. So all of you are sort of, you don't know how it actually works. But what you get help from are the different case prep materials / books and all of those things which are there. So it helps you understand how to structure a case while giving it to another person, etc., how to ask the right questions and stuff. But the biggest help basically comes from your friends in the same batch who were consultants before. I think Harvard and Stanford and these colleges might have it as well. But yeah, I think they do have it. Ours is a very strong group. Ours is a huge sort of cohort of pre-INSEAD consultants. So there were around 30-40 McKinsey consultants, 30-40 BCG consultants, same with like Bain consultants. So they knew how the sphere works, right? So you would everyone else who did not have consulting experience would regularly sort of have calls with them in order to get prepped. So ultimately, maybe it's just better than having second year students. Maybe it's better to have consultants who give you actual consulting prep questions than second year students. I mean, it works out well, right? Because INSEAD is I think the world's largest feeder into consulting.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and we will talk about consulting a little bit more as well, but this was just a question that came up for me, which was related. Speaking about your time at INSEAD, right? What are the flagship events through the year, the most important events, so to speak?
I would say the IVC, which is the INSEAD Venture Capital competition, is INSEAD's biggest competition. There's another event, which is the product hunt. So IVC is about building your own business, own venture, right? So IVC is related to that. There are 150 schools across the world which compete. And then you have product hunt as well, which is more related towards product management, building a tool, building a product, etc. So I would say those in terms of events are the two most important events. In terms of other things that keep on happening at the school, I would say the sector treks are super nice. So these are tech trek or a IB trek or a VC trek in different cities across the world. So I would say that's super experiential as well. And the third, I would say, are the exchanges. So not only the Singapore and the Fonty exchange, but also 1 week exchange to Abu Dhabi or a 1 week trek to our California campus. So all of these are sort of important as well.
Okay, fair. And did you participate in any of these opportunities?
So I participated in the IVC. Actually, I spent quite a bit of my time in building, sort of along with a few other classmates, in building a venture for the IVC. We were out of the 150 teams. We were one of the top 6 teams who went to the final round. We finally won the Patrick Turner Award, I think. So that was super nice. Yeah, I participated in the IVC. I also did an exchange with the Singapore campus. So I was in Fontainebleau for 6 months, in Singapore for like 4 months. And that also helped me grow.
Okay, very cool. In what ways would you talk about the Fontainebleau and the Singapore campuses? Like, what's the experience like at each of these places?
Yeah, I think I always tell people after having done both of them that I'm so glad that I've done both. And initially, I was not supposed to go to Singapore, but I changed my mind and thank God I did that. I always tell people have missed out if they haven't done that. I think the Singapore campus is very different because one word to explain that would be that the fact that it's a city campus, while Fontainebleau is a small town and everyone's sort of near each other, everyone knows each other, it's always about sort of house parties, meeting at different small cafes nearby, etc. While in the Singapore campus, it was more about activities that you do together within the city. So it's a bigger group going together, doing something. So the experience was quite different. Also, I went to Singapore, and that's what most people do. I went to Singapore in the winter months when it's super depressing in the Fontainebleau campus, and those who actually stayed there complained about the same when I came back. And finally, Singapore also helped me visit a lot of the Asian countries. Yeah, Fontainebleau gave me the opportunity to go to the European countries and then Singapore to the Asian countries, and all of it sort of mixed together was the perfect combination ever.
Okay, super cool. And what's the biggest challenge you faced at INSEAD?
I would say the biggest challenge was actually the first 3-4 months. The first 3-4 months, there were just so many things happening. It was just so difficult to manage everything. I think INSEAD gives you the opportunity to do anything and everything, as I mentioned. If you wanted to go deep into a subject, you could do that. If you just wanted to travel at INSEAD, you could do that. If you just wanted to play, you could do that, right? And at INSEAD, you don't have grades as well. So you don't necessarily need to study if you don't want to, even though everyone does, but it's up to you as to what you want to do. But it's just so difficult to understand what you want to do because you always have people saying yeses to different things. And you're like, oh, she said yes to this, maybe I should do it too. So how do you prioritize, shortlist the things that you want to give importance to are the most difficult things, right? That's the biggest thing that I faced in the first 3-4 months. Then it sort of eases off and you sort of start learning as well. But the initial bit is quite tricky.
Okay. Yeah. The FOMO is bothersome.
The FOMO is real. I'm glad you mentioned it. FOMO is such a good word at INSEAD in the first 4 months. Everyone sort of uses it. I don't know about other schools, but it's so real at INSEAD.
Fair. Yeah, especially because it's for a shorter time, right?
Yeah.
The MBA itself. So speaking about academics, Aishik, who are the star professors and what are the most popular courses?
Yeah, I think 2 courses stick out when you ask me this question. And interestingly, one of them is based out of the Fontainebleau campus and one of them out of the Singapore campus. The first one, the first professor is Felipe Monteiro. He's a Brazilian professor for business strategy. He was based out of the campus and it was lovely. I loved his course so much so that there was this one other elective that he was doing, and I did not get that elective because I didn't have enough points and stuff like that. But I sort of still went to a few of his classes. It was so good. And the other course I would mention is the finance course, which is taken by Antonio Fatas in the Singapore campus. Everyone should take that course in my opinion. And specifically people who do not have a finance background. He makes things sound so simple. I think it was macroeconomics, I believe so. But it just makes things sound so simple that even if you don't know anything about it, you just understand by the end of the class. So that's the other professor.
Okay, super. All right, we'll switch gears to recruiting now. Consulting recruiting at INSEAD, as you rightly said, right? It's the best in the world, incomparable. So walk us through the recruiting timeline for consulting, Aishik, end to end, from when you started and till whenever you were done.
So I think it would differ a bit, as I said, for the January batch and the August intake. Let me tell you what it is for my intake, which was the August intake. So once you go to INSEAD in August, literally nothing happens with regards to recruiting till February next year. So between those months, all you're doing is, number one, joining maybe the consulting club if you want to, right? Working on your CV, making different iterations and stuff like that. So by February, you want to be ready to apply when the time comes. So, and you don't have to go out of the way to do it. Once you join in August, they have sessions where they tell you the importance of having a good CV, what are the positives, negatives, how do you do it, etc. So they take you through all of it. But that's the journey that you have in the first 6 months.
Who's they? Is that the career?
The CDC, which is the career development center, right? And they sort of handhold and do it with you. In the meantime, you're already sort of also showing your CV to sector specific people, people in your cohort and stuff like that who have gone through the process. Maybe consultants, hey, is it sticking out? Is it other points nice, etc. So that's what you do in the initial few months. By February or maybe by January, a lot of people start prepping as well. And the process basically that I described, where you prep with your own cohort, whether they're pre-MBA consultants or not. So you sort of start prepping. So a lot of people prep from November, December. But I would say in hindsight, that's not the right thing to do. I would just tell people, don't think about it. Prepping is not that difficult. Don't even start in Jan, like starting early Feb or maybe end Jan is perfect. And you have a few of these initial sort of external coaches as well, who INSEAD brings on, where they tell you how to sort of go through each case interview, how to frame your answer, etc. So you get a lot of help on these things from the CDC, from your cohort.
Is this paid or is this?
No, most of these are free. So you don't have to pay anything.
How many sessions can you take with the CDC or the external coach?
So I think there are 2 or 3 of them. One, and these are long ones, like one 3-hour coaching and another 3-hour coaching or something of that sort. As far as I remember, I might be a bit off on this, but as far as I remember, there were two of these things. You can always have a one-on-one with your CDC and say, hey, I need more coaching. What are the different resources that you can sort of point me towards and stuff like that? And then you do it with your cohort and stuff. In the meantime, you also start by February, March, you also start having coffee chats with people from these different companies. So they come in, they say, hey, we are having a coffee chat. Do you want to do that? So that happens throughout the month of Feb and March-ish. Coffee chats and applications to these different companies. Then March and April is when all of your interviews take place. And then by the end of April, you get to know which are the companies that you've been shortlisted for. So that's the sort of process that takes place.
And I'm guessing you have to know which office you wish to choose by Feb, or is it even earlier?
You do. So for consulting, for MBBs, you need to put your first 3 preferences and say, hey, mine are going to be London, Abu Dhabi, and I don't know, Mumbai. And these are the percentages that I want to devote to. So you have 100%, you have to give 70%, 30%, or 20%, 10%, or something of that sort. Or you could give 2 as well and stuff. So you do have to put in your choices. When do you have to put it? You have to put it along with the application. So you have to know by the time you apply, it was actually mid-March-ish, I think. Yeah.
Understood. And being an international student, and given a lot of people may not have family, say, in London, is it questioned why somebody would pick London as their location, say, versus something else in India, etc.?
Yeah. So I think it's a given that most of the people who want to pursue an international experience or international MBA would not want to come back to India in the short term, at least. So I haven't seen a lot of people apply to the Indian offices. Now, if you think about outside India offices, there aren't a lot of places where Indians can apply to. For example, in most of the European cities, there's like a visa issue. You need to know the local language and stuff like that. So it really boils down to places like London. For people who want to know, I can tell all of the cities that actually are good. So it's London. Amsterdam is dicey sometimes. They do allow, some of the firms don't allow. Middle East, most of the regions you can apply to, which includes Riyadh, Abu Dhabi, Dubai. And in the Nordics, there are a couple of cities like I think Stockholm and Oslo. Sometimes some of the firms they do take. Singapore again is dicey these days. Amongst the MBBs, I think none of them took in our year. And then you can apply to some of the Australian offices as well. Yeah, you don't have a lot of choices. I mean, these may seem to be a lot of choices, but not really a lot of choices. If you are an European, you can basically apply throughout Europe, anywhere and stuff like that, right? So it becomes much easier if you're a different nationality passport.
Understood. Okay. And what resources at INSEAD did you find the most helpful in your job search? You talked about like the CDC coaching, and was the consulting club helpful as well? And if yes, how? Maybe if you could talk about some of the things that helped you the most.
Yeah, I think the consulting clubs comes out with the consulting book as well for the year, which I think is a really good resource. Along with that, of course, like they have the consulting clubs puts into folders all of the nice resources that you have. If you want to contact anyone, etc., you can also sort of go through them. But ultimately, by the end of like 6 months, 7 months, you already have a lot of contacts yourself. But yeah, some of the most important resources, I would say the CDC with all of the coaching that they gave, any questions that you want to ask, all of the structured recruitment process that they build throughout the year. That's one. The second would be your cohort itself, your own people, ex-consultants, etc. The third would be alumni. Like, for example, just to relate it to the offices question that we looked at earlier, I really don't know whether to apply to the Middle East or to London or to Singapore. Talking to my seniors who have went through the same process was so beneficial. It helped me get a perspective without which I couldn't have taken the right decision. So I think seniors, even though they go unmentioned, is super important. And I've been sort of been playing that role in the last 1 year after I graduated. And you don't even know how they're contacting, how they got your contact and stuff like that. They just randomly text you and say, hey, can we have a chat? But yeah, I would say seniors is the third most important resource.
Understood. And what led to you picking London as the location?
Interestingly, all the firms that I applied to, all of the choices that I mentioned of the cities that you need to put in, everyone hedges their options, right? Some people from McKinsey would put London, I don't know, London, Riyadh, XYZ. For Bain, they would do the other way and stuff like that. For me, all of the companies that I applied to, all of them I put as London. Like I wanted to go to London so badly. I was like, it does not matter what company I'm getting. I just want to be in London. Why I chose London is because I think as an Indian, you sort of relate to the culture a bit more compared to other cities. There's English speaking, cultural similarities and stuff. I love arts and culture, and I think there cannot be a better city if you want to immerse yourself in arts and culture. And if you want to go to 30 music concerts, and finally football as well, like it just gives you the opportunity to be a part of the football people as well.
Okay, fair. And Aishik, out of the Indian cohort, could you give us a sense for how people were placed? So for example, let's say you'd have what, like some 40 odd Indians?
Yes. So generally it's 40, but in my year it was 60. That's because mine was just the year after COVID. So a lot of people had deferred. So a lot of Indians from the previous batch had also come in. Right. So mine was 60, otherwise it's 40. And how do they get placed? Is that
Yeah.
the
So
question?
like, where are they going? How many people are going in consulting London versus consulting, say, Dubai, Middle East?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
also, like, maybe talk about tech and finance as well.
So first of all, if you take the entire cohort, I would say around 100 people go to London. 80 people go to London out of the 500. A good 40, 50 people go to Singapore. Again, a good 40, 50, 60 people go to Middle East and a bit to the US, a few people back India, quite a few in Europe and stuff like that. If I talk about the Indian community, I would say most of them are scattered across London, very few in Europe. If it's London, then it's either tech or consulting. If it's Europe, then it's mostly like startups in Berlin and stuff like that. Quite a bit in Middle East. And if it's Middle East, it's mostly consulting again and a bit in Singapore. If it's Singapore, it's again a combination of tech, product management, and consulting. In terms of the split between consulting and others, I would say consulting is the most structured recruitment program. For finance and other stuff, it's not that structured. And consulting would also be half the batch goes into consulting, right? I think in our cohort, some to MBBs around, I don't know, 100, 150 people went to MBBs. I think 100, I don't remember the exact number, but yeah. So even within India, in Indians, I would say half of the Indians must have gone into consulting across these different cities, or maybe even more than half, because I think there's a bit more tendency of Indians to get into consulting than is my feel. Does that give an overall sense?
Yeah, that does help. And so what are the other Indians doing? The ones who are not getting into consulting?
Yeah, I know a few people in product at Amazon in London. I know a few people who are in product or go-to-market strategy in Berlin / Australia and stuff. I know a few people in tech in Singapore. A couple of people have come back to India. If it's not consulting, it's mostly tech. I know a couple of people in VC in London as well. But yeah, apart from consulting, I would say the only other structured or substantial part would be tech for Indians. And then there would be like a few people here, a few people there. And those people have their own. I don't think INSEAD was the biggest help in them getting into those fields. I think it was a lot of connects and stuff like that. But yeah, that's more or less, I think, how the cohort is placed.
Okay, understood. For somebody who's interested in recruiting for tech, would you recommend that they go for an American school instead of INSEAD?
My feel would be yes. I mean, of course, see, ultimately it comes down to how much you want to be in the US versus not. And for me, I never wanted to be in the US. So I think that was an important reason. So even if you told me, hey, do you want to be in tech in the Silicon Valley, which is amazing, right? Because you're in the middle of all things new and stuff like that, I would have still said no and rather been at Amazon or Google and stuff like that in London. So once you enter London, even in tech, you get access to all of the major companies, including, I think Google's largest office in Europe is in London, right? And it's just creating a new one. So even if you get into one particular company, tech company in London, and then basically the entire field opens up for the next 4-5 years where you can keep on switching companies if you wish to. So I would have still gone to London. But if you ask me overall, if people are location agnostic, 100%, I think the schools in the US would give you a much better money in tech compared to how much you earn in tech in London. You're a part of all the cool teams, etc. in the US, and they're more structured in terms of recruiting from within US than from INSEAD for sure. So I would definitely say the US schools.
Understood. And speaking about salaries being different based on the location.
Yeah.
Do consulting salaries vary as well for, say, London versus Middle East
Yeah.
versus India? If so, could you give us a sense for how?
In London, the salaries across everything is bad. So in London, I don't think if salary is the motivation for you, then you don't go to London. As simple as that. Because it's like 40%, 45% of tax. You earn, I would say, what you get in the US. If London is X, then in US you get around 1.4X with a 30% tax. In London, it's X with a 40% tax. It's in the Middle East, it's around in hand after everything is 3X that of London. What you earn in London, you get thrice the amount in the Middle East after tax. Same thing with Singapore. You at least get like 2X of that of London. And in London, the rents are higher, food is more expensive. So nothing's nice apart from the football and arts and culture and people and all the rest of it. But money is certainly not the best thing.
That's helpful perspective. Aishik, if you could go back in time and do one thing differently, what would you change about your MBA experience?
Frankly, I wouldn't. I think, and I have this concept in life that I never want to repent or change any of the decisions or things that I've faced in life. That's one of my sort of go-to philosophies in life. Because if I want to change that one thing, all of the other things that have happened in life will also change. So yeah, you can't really change one thing and stick with that. So I definitely wouldn't. I think where I am, starting from our beginning of the journey, from deciding to do an MBA, to working with you, to being at INSEAD, to exploring both Singapore and Fontainebleau, to visiting around 20 countries in that 1 year, to getting McKinsey, to being in London for the last 1 year, amazing experiences. Of course, there have been dips in the middle, but do I want to change anything? Not really. I think I am who I am because of the experiences that I've gone through.
What's your most memorable experience at INSEAD?
Oh, wow. What's that one memorable experience? I think all of the trips that I did were certainly things that stood out for me. One of the first trips that I did was to Iceland, which I think because of who I was, the people I was with, and Iceland being such an amazing, picturesque country, I think that really stood out. And the second thing I would say that really stood out was I created the graduation video for our class that was shown during the final graduation ceremony. So that was super, like I felt a bit of pride that I was the one who created it. So that was also nice.
Wow, that's super cool. Continued the tradition you'd been having with your friends as well, right?
For sure. For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that's super cool. And Aishik, speaking a little bit about your post MBA experiences, right? What does a day in your job look like?
I think as an associate, what McKinsey expects out of you, or any of the consulting companies, what they expect out of you is for you to be able to assimilate different sources of information into something which answers the problem statement that you have. What they do not want you to be is the knowledge expert for all the questions that the client gives you, right? So you are supposed to talk to all the right people in order to assimilate the right knowledge and put it in a succinct way which answers the question at hand. So now coming to a particular day, that's exactly what I do, where I understand the problem statement initially, have a lot of meetings internally to sort of problem solve, understand the question more, talk to the clients and say, hey, is this what you're really asking? And then once you do that, have like a own view hypothesis, a hypothesis sort of, you sort of write it down. Then you talk to experts, etc., in the subject matter, and you say, hey, this is my thought process. Do you think this is right? Internally, you go to sort of your research team and say, hey, can you give me data points to validate this? So that's how, and finally, as usual in the consulting sector, you ultimately create a PowerPoint presentation to put in all your views. And then you sort of keep on repeating this, and repeating this.
Okay, got it. And how do you get staffed on your cases?
It actually differs from country to country. What I've heard is that in India, a lot of the staffing happens through your sort of staffing team, while in most, like in London and at least the US as well, a lot of the staffing happens through your own network. So initially in the first couple of staffing, they'll sort of help you get staffed, but slowly you build your network. And what I mean by network is basically your interest areas. So let's say you're interested in a particular practice, education for me, let's say, then I would sort of keep on talking to those people and say, hey, I'm interested. Can I work on a piece? Once you work on them, like 4 people, it builds. And then they contact you saying, hey, I work with you. Do you want to work on the next case? So that's how you get staffed in those areas. Yeah.
And how long does it take to get specialized in a specific sector?
So I am, first of all, an integrative consultant. So, and that was one of the reasons why I joined McKinsey, because I was in tech before, and I sort of wanted to have a broader views, understand every practice or every function or every industry. But I'm at that stage where I'm starting to sort of specialize a bit. Ultimately, I think by the end of your sort of second year, you want to be at a place where you're sort of comfortable to say that this is my home, even though I do bits and pieces in other areas, but mostly I focus on this practice, which could be for you sustainability, a combination of sustainability and finance. So sustainable financing could be sort of your thing. But yeah, I would say if it happens early, if you know by day one, hey, I want to be in healthcare, that's amazing. So you could focus on that. But no one expects that out of you. But I think the expectation comes at the end of 1.5, 2 years, where you need to be more or less aligned with a particular sort of home, even though you're doing bits and pieces in other areas.
Okay, got it. And what's your focus area now?
So I've done a lot of basically healthcare and life sciences. So that's one for sure. But I'm still actually searching a bit more. I want to do a bit of sustainability. I'm super into sustainability these days, by the way, at a personal level as well.
Say
so
more.
Professional. Okay, so I came to know that if you're a non-vegetarian and if you, let's say, convert all your breakfasts of any one particular meal into veg, the amount of CO2 that you save for 1 month, right? That's equal to 1 hour of flight journey that you do. So if you just do a 1 hour flight journey from here to Delhi is 3 hours, right? That's equal to 3 months of effort that you put in to not have non-veg and have veg. My mind was blown. I was like, that's crazy. That's crazy. So after that, I started using the public transport more. And the London was helpful in that. I started having a bit more veg. I said, hey, if I don't want to take a flight, I wouldn't take a flight if that's not necessary. And I think that's why you grow, because it starts at an individual level. And then you sort of talk to people understand this a bit more. And then it starts happening. Because frankly speaking, I think the world is not going in the right direction. But that's a story for another day, I guess.
Yeah. What's the current recruiting environment like in consulting?
It's not the best. So the year after our year actually went through a really difficult phase. Recruitment was not that good. MBBs were also not really hiring that much across all cities, etc. But I would also say you can't help that. You just give your best. That's the advice that I have for all my friends or all my juniors who were all a bit negative, right? They were a bit apprehensive, anxious. And that's exactly what I said. You are in this. You have to convert it. Don't think about how many people they'll take in. Just give your best. So, but I also do think that the worst is we're through the worst, and in the next 1 year, so all of the people who are looking at this video who are applying for the MBA schools, I think by another 2 years it should be much better. So there's always ups and downs in recruitment. I think that the lowest trough is done.
Okay, encouraging. And Aishik, as you look back, what has been the impact of the INSEAD MBA on you personally and professionally?
I would actually combine personally and professionally in no particular order, but I think it's make me more confident. I think I'm much more confident as a person, given the wide variety of experiences, interactions that I've had. So I think that's the most important aspect. I would say it increased my knowledge a lot. Some of the courses that I took at INSEAD, I had no clue about before. Right? So it gave me a lot of knowledge. Some of the people that I met were so knowledgeable that helped me grow in knowledge as well. I think my communication skills have become better. And this is not only in terms of like my English, but being aware of the other person who I'm talking to, because I know more about the other person now if he's from a different culture, different place. So it just makes communication a bit more easier. And finally, I would say, and I think this is a growth point for sure, that I think I'm more aware of how privileged I am. I think to have been able to do an MBA with some of the most, just say, intelligent or most high-performing people around the world, to be able to be in London, one of the best cities in the world, I think it just makes me realize how privileged I am on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. That's awesome. As we're close to wrapping up, do you have any final advice for prospective applicants or incoming MBA students?
I think during the application process, it's important to not be negative at all. I think all of us, when we start off, are super apprehensive because it feels as if it's not achievable. Like when you think of INSEAD or a Harvard or a Stanford or any of the top B schools, you think, oh, wow, I can't do this. Like, I think only good people get it, and I'm not good enough. I think we should stop saying that to ourselves. I think the first process of getting in is to believe in yourself. Yeah, that just makes a hell lot of difference, right? So that's the first thing. During the process, I think persistence. Just keep going. If they're working with you, keep doing what you say, keep sticking to the timeline, etc. So that's the second thing. And finally, when you get through, in order to better your experience during your MBA, I think be inquisitive, keep an open mind, and keep learning. I think if you have that mindset, that growth mindset, let's just say, I think no one can stop you having a great time at your MBA school.
Yeah, fantastic. Amazing. With those pearls of wisdom, we'll bring the show to a conclusion. Oishik, thank you so much for your time and really, really appreciate all the nuggets of wisdom that you've shared.
No, I mean, thank you for having me. The first day when you texted me to be on the show, I thought I was super privileged. I mean, thank you for having me, and I hope that this helps people who are watching this.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. And the privilege is very mutual. Thanks once again, Oishik.